Gti. Fun fact for you, the legendary 1980s hatchback, the Lancia Delta, which spawned the Delta Integrale, was actually badged as a Saab, the Saab Lancia 600 in Norway, Sweden and Finland. And now you know. Let's start the show! So I think the only way to start this episode is with Gordon Murray design. Gordon Murray, as you might be aware, but if you're not, Gordon Murray was a legendary Formula 1 designer and engineer who went on to build the Mclaren F1 amongst other things, and a couple of months back he released his new supercar, which is kind of the modern interpretation of his legendary McLaren F1. He's called it the T50. Normally aspirated V12 that revs to something like, I don't know, 11,000 RPM, less than a ton, manual gearbox, has a fan in the back for extra aerodynamics, compact, blah blah blah. Couple of million quid, making X amount of them, I think 150. Yeah, what a cool car. He has now, just yesterday, launched the T50S, which is the track-focused version of the T50 supercar. Unlike the McLaren F1, where they never had racing in mind, and they still managed to win Le Mans, beating prototype cars, with what was essentially just road cars with a little bit of weight stripped out of them and some stiffer springs and a wing strapped on the back. Even some of them still had H-pattern manual gearboxes. Anyway, that's a certain side point. This T50S was developed alongside the road car from the beginning. So it is a bespoke track car, and it's quite ludicrous. They've managed to squeeze out, I don't know, something like 50 more horsepower and whatever. It makes 725 horsepower in a naturally aspirated V12, which is developed by Cosworth. It doesn't have the manual anymore. It has a paddle shift gearbox, which I think is called an IEGS, which basically somehow it knows. It's already selected the gear apparently before. I don't understand it. It's too complicated for my small brain. It produces 1.5 tons of downforce. They actually managed to get it up to 1.9 tons, but they pulled it back so the tyres would have an easier job of it. Yeah, it's incredible. They're only making, I think, 25 of these, and almost all of them are snapped up. It looks amazing. It's aggressive. It's got ram air. It's gonna rev to 12,000 RPM. That V12. But I think then the greatest thing about it is they've decided to call this car the T50 Lauda, Niki Lauda. It's based after, as I'm sure everyone's aware of, Niki Lauda, thanks to films like Lauda and Hunt, but the legendary Formula 1 driver who sadly passed away last year at the age, I think he was only 72. But talking about a man who battled against the odds. It's great because Gordon Murray worked with Niki Lauda over several different teams and years in Formula 1, but they both worked together on the Brabham BT46, which was the original fan car, where the new T50 gets the idea for the fan at the rear of its car. The fan in this car, which they say was banned by Formula 1, but actually Brabham, which was actually run by Bernie Ecclestone at the time, Bernie Ecclestone and Gordon Murray both decided that they would remove it from the car because people were protesting, and to be honest, it was a bit too good. It sucked the car to the ground, so basically it doubled the ground effect. But apparently it was tricky to drive, but it was fast. It only won one race. It only entered 2 races and only won one. It was won by Niki Lauda, and as I said, the car was designed by Gordon Murray. The only annoying bit about the historic alignment of this whole thing is the Brabham BT46 was competing in the height of the Cosworth DFV V8 Formula 1 engine, which ran for almost 30 years with many successes. Unfortunately, at the time, Brabham were actually using Alfa Romeo engines, so the Cosworth engine in the T50 car unfortunately has no link to the Brabham Formula 1 car. It had the fan on it, but hey ho, it's still a pretty good story and a real great mark of respect to a legend that is Niki Lauda. In slightly less interesting news, Mercedes have unveiled the new C-Class, which looks quite like the old one. All of the initial models are mild hybrids. There's still some diesels in there, and there will be some plug-in hybrids coming along the way. Yeah, it's a bit boring on the outside. The inside is bleh. Mercedes interiors are so bad. They're so tacky and chintzy. Massive screens, lack of buttons, whatever. Too much going on. It doesn't mention anything about the C63. Well, that's the news we're all waiting for, because it's all but being confirmed that the next C63, rather than having a V8, is going to be a 4-cylinder. And the Cupra Formentor that I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, the essentially Golf 4 and stilts from the Seat sub-brand, which is a standalone brand, Cupra. Anyway, so I also mentioned last week, I think, that they're going to put the 5-cylinder Audi engine in the Formentor and call it the VZ5. And they've now actually launched the car as one of these sporty crossover things. It's not a bad looking car, I'll give that much. I wouldn't own one. And they have put the 5-cylinder in, and it's only 10 horsepower shy of the power output it puts out in the Audi RS3. So they've given it a good old, they haven't held back. It makes 7,000 of them, which, that seems about right. The sad part, it's going to be left-hand drive only. Well, actually, I say that's the worst part about it. The worst part about it is the rear tailpipes are stacked. Now, I don't know who thought this was a good idea. Ferrari tried this a few years ago with California. They backed out of it when they facelifted the car and went for a regular setup. Lexus tried it with the original ISF. They backed out of it eventually. I think there was even the top two pipes in the Lexus were fake, which they probably are in this as well. But as I say, it's left-hand drive only, so if you happen to be watching this from a left-hand drive market, check that out. If not, fuck you, Cupra, Seat, Audi, Volkswagen. A slightly more interesting new car release this week is Hyundai's new electric vehicle called the Ioniq 5. Ioniq now is going to become an entirely electric propelled sub-brand of Hyundai. And they've released this, the Ioniq 5, which when I saw the pictures I thought was a hatchback that they're bringing to the market, an all-electric hatchback to rival, say, the Honda E and say the ID3. But looking at the dimensions of it, it's actually crossover size. It's the same size as a Volvo XC60. But sounds interesting. It's got 800 volt technology like a Porsche Taycan, which means it can hold or it can manage rapid charging. And they're saying that you could charge the battery from 10% to 80% in 18 minutes if you can get 220 kilowatt rapid charging, which I don't even know if outside of a Tesla supercharging anything like that in Ireland. So yeah, the thing that will stymie this car the most will be infrastructure, as it is with every EV. But they're claiming, lots of performance. You'll be able to get in 4-wheel drive, rear-wheel drive, and the base one will have 160 horsepower rear-wheel drive, and the top spec one will have 302 horsepower 4-wheel drive and 446 pounds of torque. So it won't be looking for performance, I tell you. It's a good looking car, I must say. I really like it. I love the wheels. Now this is the launch edition that they're bringing out. It's going to be called the Project 45 Special Edition, because it's actually based on a concept car that they showed us last year, the Project 45. And I must say, it's the production version is it's quite close to the concept. They've taken most of the styling details, especially the wheels. I think it's a cool looking car, and Hyundai said all the subsequent Ioniq electric cars. I think the next one's going to be, there's going to be a 6 and a 7. A 6 will be a bigger saloon, I think it is, and then the 7's going to be an SUV. He said they're all going to be styled quite differently, which is strange because people do manufacturers tend to like a kind of a family face to all their cars, so it gives them a brand identity. But no, Ioniq said they've decided they're going to go different with this. They're going to design them all differently, keep it interesting. But hey, if they look as good as this thing, hey ho. Then the last bit of new automotive news. Journalists have finally got their hands on the Mark 8 Golf R. And unsurprisingly, it's pretty good. It's the pick of the bunch of the Mark 8. I've said already, I don't really care for the Mark 8. I just think I'll just have a Mark 7 if I was going to get a Golf. But it has the biggest update is it still runs the 2-litre EA888 turbocharged engine. I think it's pushing out 320 brake now. It's 5-door only, it's DSG only. But in the OR it has proper paddles, unlike the rest of the range, which is kind of cool. But they have updated the 4-wheel drive system. It now has a drift mode, which is ridiculous. You might try it once, maybe in a closed car park. but like, who's really going to rag a brand new Golf 4 in drift mode? And you can't. Yeah, it's a gimmick, but it does show that, you know, power can be shifted to the rear a lot more than the front biased Haldex 4-wheel drive systems that we're familiar with from Volkswagen Audi Group products. And it has torque vectoring from each rear wheel. So apparently it is quite a playful Golf 4 compared to the ones that have gone before. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear more about it. I've only read one review. It was by a certain Mr. Dan Prosser, who works for Drive Nation and Piston Heads, amongst others. He's a freelance journalist. I'm sure plenty of you are familiar with him. He ran a Mark 7 Golf 4 for a year, and he was a big fan of it. He's a big thumbs up for the Golf 4, is El Dan. And he liked the way this drove. Again, he admits that, you know, it looks a bit cat and the interior is a bit cat, but he liked the way it drove. So yeah, it's promising. Unsurprisingly, the best Golf in the range is the best Golf to get. But again, fuck the Mark 8. Now, don't fall asleep, but some Formula 1 news. We've had the first few 2021 Formula 1 cars released in the last week. It's a strange one because there was supposed to be new regulations brought in this year, 2021, completely revising the aerodynamic setup of the car. We're going to have 18-inch wheels, etc. I'll put up a render now of what the FIA and Formula 1 envision the cars will look like. But coronavirus, etc., they decided to push it back a year. So it's only a very small, well, we say small, it's small to the eye, the changes that they're making for this year. The floor of the Formula 1 cars, which you might be able to see on this one here, there's less floor space, so the aerodynamicists have less room to put aerodynamic devices in the floor. It tapers off. The rear diffusers are smaller, so there's a drop in aerodynamic performance at the rear of the car to trying just to bring performance levels down and make it easier for the cars to follow each other, which we'll see. So that's the big changes. So the first people out of the gate were McLaren. They brought us out the MCL35M, M being M for modified version of last year's car, which was the MCL35. The biggest change for McLaren is, though, that they had that spat with Honda a couple of years ago, and in the last couple of years they've been running Renault engines, which have been doing pretty well for them. But now they have the Mac Daddy. Literally, they have the Mercedes engine for 2021. So they've had to do a fair bit of redesign to the rear of their car to fit the new engine. But McLaren have been on a bit of an upward trend. They have Daniel Ricciardo in the car now alongside Lando Norris. So yeah, McLaren, Mercedes, like back in the 90s and early 90s, could be a good package. Whether you can win and be a championship contender as a customer engine supplier, we shall see. But yeah, so McLaren were first. Delivery is fine. It's quite similar to the last couple of years, blue and orange. It's okay. I think they could have done a little bit better, but plenty of sponsors on it. Good to see. So we had McLaren. Then next up was AlphaTauri, who, if you don't know who AlphaTauri are, even though they won a race last year, they won Monza, a bit of a fluke, but it was cool. AlphaTauri used to be Toro Rosso, which is the sister team of Red Bull, and they decided to change it to AlphaTauri. AlphaTauri is a fashion brand owned by Red Bull head honcho Dietrich Mateschitz. So they use the Formula 1 team to advertise the new fashion label, which is just overpriced tat, to be honest with you. So they've made a few little changes aerodynamically, and they haven't gone mad. They could have taken some of the tech as is allowed in the rules from Red Bull, but they were so confident with their own aerodynamic design that they've decided to go alone, bar the odd bits and bobs here. They've kind of changed the livery, and they've kind of gone for a two-tone with the navy and then white on the bottom with white wheels, which I kind of like. People were a bit sniffy that the livery isn't as good as it was last year, and it's certainly not as good as it was when they were in their final couple of years of Toro Rosso with the blue and silver. But anyway, that's gone. I can see why they've done it, because most of where the aerodynamic changes are for probably all teams this year is going to be in around the front wing and the very complicated barge board area around the sides, which directs flow around the side and the back of the car. Because it's white on white, it's really hard to see the barge boards, so it just makes it less easy for other teams to try to snoop in on what their aerodynamic tricks are and copy them. But yeah, AlphaTauri, they have Pierre Gasly, who won the Monza Grand Prix last year. He was demoted from from Red Bull at the end of 2019 because he wasn't quite pulling his punches. He was replaced by Alex Albon, who's actually been demoted to test driver for Red Bull now, reserve driver. But yeah, he had that win last year, and he's his confidence is building back up. So he might get back to Red Bull eventually. And then he's been joined by a new driver. He was a former F3 champion. I think he came second or third in F2 last year. Yuki Tsunoda, Japanese racing driver, 5'2". I think he might be the smallest Formula 1 driver we've had in a long time. Yeah, he says he wants to be the first Japanese racing driver to win a Grand Prix. Surprisingly, there has never been one. A couple of podium finishes, but no Japanese winners. But yeah, best of luck to them. You can't help but like AlphaTauri because essentially, although a lot of investment and revolving door when it comes to staff has happened, but AlphaTauri essentially is the minnows of the 80s, 90s, and early millennium Minardi. And with that tenuous link, you can't help but love them. And they're Italian. Then after AlphaTauri, we had Alfa Romeo, which is Sauber. It's a bit of a branding exercise. Again, they kind of muddled around with their livery. Definitely the best looking of the cars so far. It's very swoopy and lush, as only the Italians would. Although technically the team is Swiss. Again, they've kind of fallen by, especially last year, which wasn't helped by the Ferrari engine, which was not particularly competitive last year, which is in the back of the Alfa Romeo. But their aerodynamic development hasn't been great over the last couple of seasons, so they really have a lot to prove this year. Same driver lineup, Antonio Giovinazzi, because Alfa Romeo want an Italian. Kimi Räikkönen is still there. It's the last year of his contract. Whether he'll sign again, this could be his last one, but who knows? Maybe he'll sign for another 2 years. But I think that all depends on what happens this year, whether Alfa perform well, and who and what the team will be at the end of the season, because the Alfa Romeo tie-up ends at the end of the year. Alfa Romeo is now part of the Stellantis group, which is the big conglomerate. Stellantis, I'm going to put up an image of it's a big merger of several car brands, Alfa Romeo being one of them. So whether they'll continue this, whether they'll rebrand it as one of the other brands, continue Alfa Romeo, maybe someone else will jump in, maybe they'll change engine supplier, new drivers. It's an interesting 12 months, I think, for Alfa Romeo. And okay, so then the last car we've had this week, the Red Bull RB16B. So the RB16 was last year's car, and this is just the B spec in evolution. The least amount of visual changes. Again, their nose cone is a little bit different, and then the floor and the diffuser as part of the rules. The livery is the same. They have Max Verstappen still, and he's been joined by Sergio Perez, which is great because Perez is a great driver. It's great to see he's getting another chance at a front running team, especially after he won a race for Racing Point. Yeah, they were Racing Point last year, weren't they? Yeah, gets confusing because they were Force India, they were Racing Point, and now they're going to be Aston Martin next year. But anyway, enough about them. Yeah, Red Bull, they've also managed, because Honda are pulling out at the end of 2021 out of Formula 1. There's been an engine freeze, engine development freeze as of the end of this year, so manufacturers can no longer develop the engine up until I think 2025, when there'll be a new set of rules brought in. So Honda are sticking with Red Bull until the end of the year. They're going to develop the engine as much as possible, and then Red Bull are going to take over the intellectual property rights for the engine, and they're going to continue. It'll be badged as a Red Bull, and they're going to continue having that Honda power unit. So they will be a full-on manufacturer at that point. They will have their own engine, own chassis, etc., etc. But yeah, it's interesting. It's definitely going to be a stopgap year for Red Bull. Hopefully they can just get a bit closer to Mercedes. But 2022, they're going to want to see some big changes. We all are. So hopefully the future is bright for Red Bull and also Ferrari, but we won't talk about them yet because they're not releasing their car until the 10th of March. That's it for the Formula 1 cars so far. The next one isn't until the 2nd of March, which is next Tuesday, which is Alpine, who were Renault. Again, another branding exercise. Haas hasn't confirmed when they're releasing theirs yet, but until then, we're not getting any more Formula 1 cars until next week. So if you're still watching after all that Formula 1 news, let me talk you through some classifieds of the week. So I talked about the McLaren, not the McLaren, Freudian slip, the Gordon Murray Automotive T50S. So I was thinking, What if you wanted a sub 1 ton performance car, but you haven't quite got the money or got your name on the list for the T50 or the T50S? So my original thought was like, maybe go for a Lotus Elise, none for sale in Ireland, unsurprisingly. Maybe an Alfa Romeo 4C, none of them either, didn't sell many of them anyway, and apparently they're not great. But then I was like, the ultimate sub-ton performance car for me has got to be the Citroen Ax Gti. Hard to get official figures on it, but some say it was as low as 750 kilos. And I found one for sale in Ireland, only 1,500 quid. Now, it has been off the road for nearly 20 years, according to the ad. There's a bit of dust on it. Now, there does seem to be a bit of damage around the steering rack, kind of ignition barrel. There's no other shots of the interior. The ad itself says seats 0. It's missing a rear window too. So perhaps it was stolen maybe 20 years ago and it's been sitting in the back of a barn. I'm only speculating. It certainly is a project if anyone wants to take it on. But I think for 1,500 quid, if it's a straight and true car, yeah, that could be a nice little thing. I'd say getting Ax Gti interiors isn't particularly easy if it doesn't have one, which probably doesn't. Just stick a couple of Recaros in it, put a big massive strut brace in the back and get yourself a sub 1 ton performance car. Beautiful. And then just another, while I was searching, I couldn't find many more sub ton cars. But then I found a person who's selling not one, but 2 Porsches for €8,000. One of them is a Porsche 924, which I know isn't the most loved Porsche, but he wants $2,000 for that by itself. And then the other one is a first generation, the 94 is 1982, and then this is a 1998 Boxster, and $7,000 if you want to buy that by itself. So $7,000 for the Boxster, $2,000 for the 944, or you can have the two of them together for $8,000. The ad is scant. It just says 2 Porsches for sale: Porsche 1, 82, 94, 2000, Porsche 2, 98, Boxster, $7,000, both for 8,000. No offers, both are running. That's all it says. I did look up the NCTs. I believe the 924 is valid for another couple of days. It's got like I think 3 or 4 days left on its NCT. The Boxster's been out since August of last year, but maybe just, COVID and all, and he just hasn't bothered. Yeah, look, if you have $8,000 and you want 2 Porsches, I think that's well worth investigating. They're in Kildare. Look them up, 2 Porsches for the price of, well, yeah, for the price of 1. Although, before you go rushing to the ad, the Boxster is a Tiptronic. So that's all I have for you today. I hope you've managed not to fall asleep, and you've gained some wonderful knowledge about the motor vehicle from the last 20 minutes or so, however long this rambling bullshit has been. Do stay safe. I'll be back again with you soon. Okay, have a good day. Okay, bye.